All right, welcome back, Raider Nation. Silver and black tonight. I have a new video system, so sorry for the abrupt ending of the intro, but thanks for being with us here live tonight, and we're going to talk some Raider football. Obviously, yesterday, a big day in Raider Nation, and joining me to discuss what happened yesterday, my good friend Evan Groat from the Just Pod Baby podcast. Evan, what a day, huh? A lot of new things. I think Raider Nation still kind of digesting what happened yesterday. Tell us what you think off the top. What was your initial impressions yesterday with the introduction of Dave Ziegler as the GM and Josh McDaniels as the 22nd head coach of the Las Vegas Raiders?
Well, I'm glad it's finally over because it seemed like it was the GM and head coaching search that went on for quite a long time. I believe there was 12 candidates total between the head coach and the general manager, and fans were just waiting to find out who it would be. And when we finally got the news, we had been hearing some rumors, through social media, through some of the insiders, who it may be, and they were right. It ended up being Ziegler and Josh McDaniels coming over from the Patriots. And, I was impressed with what I heard from both men yesterday. They seem like they have a clear plan of what they want to do with this team. And you heard a lot about culture. And I think that's something that the Raiders absolutely need, is a clear leader with a clear vision for this team and to develop a new culture in this organization.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And I think that, we look at what happened yesterday, Evan, and so much to discuss here. And what I want to start with Dave Ziegler, and I want to play a little bit of his press conference for the viewers. I know most of you out there have seen it, but I do want to play that. So we're going to go to that. Here's the introduction, just the first few minutes. And Evan, I want to get your reaction because a couple key things stuck out to me here, and I want to play that for you. So here's Dave Ziegler from the press conference yesterday.
Welcome, Dave. Appreciate it. What I'd like to do right now is just have Dave let you know a little bit about himself, and we'll go from there.
All right. Well, first, I want to thank everyone for being here today and taking time out of your day, those in the room and those watching outside of the room. First, I want to thank Mark and the committee that was involved in the hiring process. It was a very thorough process. A detailed process, and I know they interviewed a lot of quality candidates. So it's really an honor for them to select me as the next general manager of the Las Vegas Raiders and to represent Raider Nation. Mark's passion for the Raiders, his commitment to my beliefs and what's important to me to make this organization a championship caliber organization, and his commitment to winning and his energy made this job highly desirable for me and my family. The stadium, the facilities, the weight room, the training room, the locker room, I could go on and on. It really is, it harkens back to a phrase made famous by the late Al Davis. There really is a commitment to excellence when you walk into this building and when you walk into this stadium. The phrase commitment to excellence resonates with many of my core beliefs and a lot of the foundational pieces that will be important to building a championship culture here. We'll be an organization that lives in the details. No task will be too small. Every task will be measured with the same standard of excellence. We will hire excellent people that are driven by team and that are loyal to our cause. We will strive to have high-end communication at all levels of the organization, which takes effort and takes time to build. We'll be demanding, but never demeaning. We'll invest in the growth of our employees and have them reach their goals. The fabric of our culture will be to evaluate and evolve consistently and constantly our processes and our people to make sure that we are always operating at a championship level. Being committed to the standard of excellence is going to occur from the top down, and it's what it will take to build this organization into an organization that consistently competes for championships.
Well, there you go, Evan. You know, you look at this and it's hard not to notice, I think, a couple things. One, the one thing that stuck out at me right from the get-go was his call out to this, the organization will pay attention to the details. If you know anything about where Dave Ziegler and Josh McDaniels come from, of course, the New England Patriots organization, you know the relentless focus on every single detail that Bill Belichick is known for. And so to me, that you look at even the progress the Raiders have made over the last 3 or 4 years under John Gruden, this year under Rich Bisaccia, of course, and some of what Mike Mayock did, even though they weren't fully successful, they did build a little bit of a start there, but the details were not always the best. The I's weren't dotted. The T's weren't crossed necessarily. To me, that was an important thing to hear from Dave Ziegler.
Yeah, and you can tell they did their homework with the organization. You heard a lot about commitment to excellence there. He mentioned that both him and Josh McDaniels mentioned that word in their press conference. You also heard both men, and I know we're speaking about Ziegler right now, but evolving and adapting. And I think that's a good thing for the Raiders, because that was one of the knocks, I think, on John Gruden, is that did he truly evolve to where the game is at right now? And that was one of the concerns I think a lot of people had when Gruden came back. Did the game pass him by? And so I think those are some of the things that I like to hear. And at the very end there, you heard Ziegler talking about building a team that can consistently compete for championships. And to me, that was huge, because it's great that the Raiders made the playoffs this year, but I've always been looking for a team that is a consistent winner, a consistent threat, and will always be a factor in the AFC West division. That's what I'm looking for. I'm not looking for a playoff appearance every 4 to 5 years. We're looking for consistency here. Yeah,
that's the key, and getting over the hump, because I will tell you, Evan, the one thing when a lot of fans out there, and again, we have been at the forefront of giving Rich Bisaccia credit for the job he had to do. It was an impossible job. You step into just a mess after mess after mess. I understand that. But where I did not relate to Raider Nation out there saying, oh, we got to keep him. Oh, this is a good man. No question he's a good man. But you have to look at the fact that you have to build from within. You have to build a culture. And I wrote a story on Sportsnaut yesterday talking about why Josh McDaniels, the success of Josh McDaniels, is so in line with Ziegler coming with him. The fact that they're both coming in, and it was based off, Evan, what I saw in a piece that Michael Lombardi wrote up on Daily Coach, which he talked about when you go into an organization, Bill Belichick and his aides have failed over the years because they go in and they want to change the culture, but they try to do it with the people already there. We had a lot of folks who were in love with Gus Bradley because of the progress on defense. Did a good job, no question. But I kept trying to tell them that, listen, when you have a new coach, you have to bring in his people who think his way, who are going to institute his culture. And I think that's why, if you heard both of them talk about it yesterday, that's the word they used often, because you can't retrain people. You need to kind of clean house, almost like a political office. I hate to get political. I'm not really getting political. I'm just comparing it to, which is, you don't have a Republican administration might win, a Democratic administration may win, and they might keep some bureaucrats in places, but their top level positions, they know they need people who think like them, eat like them, breathe like them, everything. And I think that's what's important. And so to get this clean sweep with Ziegler, who's worked with Josh McDaniels for 11 years, to me, that's going to be a key to success here, because they can hit the ground running. They know each other's tendencies, and they have the same philosophy.
Yeah, and they touched on that. I believe Ziegler touched on that during the press conference yesterday, when he was asked about, the time it would take for them to get on the same page. And he said, we've already been working together for several years. We've already established that relationship, and they can, as you said, hit the ground running. And I think you also heard, I read a piece, Vic Tafer's piece today from The Athletic, where he kind of gave some details of the whole interview process and how that went down. One of the things that Mark Davis asked each candidate when they came in to interview was, for the GMs, he asked them who was the head coach that he'd like to pair up with, and he asked the same question to the head coach, who was the general manager that you'd like to pair up with. And Of course, Ziegler said McDaniels. And I think, a lot of fans, myself, wanted to see Jim Harbaugh. That was my first choice. But I think when you talk about the pairing of a potential general manager, this does make a little bit more sense to provide for more of a seamless transition and, having the two men be on the same page with the same vision, coming from the same environment in New England. I think it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, no, it definitely does. And I think that one of the questions that you heard, I think, was from the get-go, and I'm glad that they clarified it, and I didn't have any doubt. I think we all kind of knew, which was the fact that, who's making the call, right? And I think with Josh McDaniels, no one ever thought that he was going to be in a position where maybe even Jim Harbaugh might demand a little more input on the roster, a little more control, not quite Gruden control, but certainly a little more because of his experience level, the fact that he had that NFL coaching pedigree anymore. But they made it very clear, no. And I love this because you have to have clear roles. And in this case, Ziegler really, put it out there and said, listen, I'm the guy who makes the call. Sure, I'm going to talk to Josh about what we need and what he thinks we're going to need. But this is really important because over the last 4 years, some of the dysfunction we've seen and now heard post Gruden is around that dysfunction of who's in charge, who's making the call. Now you have the guy on the field in McDaniels who's making the calls, who can coach football and worry about fixing that. And then you got the guy in the front office whose job solely is to go out, get players so this team can win.
Absolutely. And that question was asked really early on to Ziegler, and I'm glad it was because it was something that I was, curious about myself. And again, I agree with you 100%. There's clear roles here. Ziegler's job is to build the roster, acquire the talent, and then McDaniels will have input on that. They will collaborate together on that, and then McDaniels can focus on getting the most out of these players and putting these players in the best spot to be successful. So I like the collaboration talk that we heard, and the idea that there are going to be clear roles, because that was one of the things we talk about. Some of these bad, poor draft picks, people still don't know whose call it was. Or, there's been a lot of talk about, oh, that was a Mayock pick, that was a Gruden pick. Yeah. So now there will be none of that. We know who the man making the pick is, and we know who the man coaching the players on the field is.
Yeah, and Evan, we're looking here. Our good friend Rossi down in Australia. Good day, mate. I know I did that poorly, Rossi. I apologize. He says, love that Ziegler owned the room yesterday. Ownership on player personnel will be his decision, although collaborative. Yes, Rossi, I think that's true because, again, I thought that's where, the Gruden thing. Listen, I never had any question that Gruden was 99.9% making all the decisions. But then they bring Mayock in, and everybody likes Mayock, and he's a good evaluator of talent, but yet nobody knew the calls he was making. So this, Evan, really does kind of get that mess done with, and now people know if you got a question about a draft pick, you're going to Dave Ziegler. If you got a question about a player and if they're playing, if they're performing on the field, you go to Josh McDaniels. That clear delineation, I think, helps the players too. It's just it sets the organization in a structure that people can grasp quickly and do so in a way that allows them to focus on what the real job is, which is winning on the field.
Yeah, and I remember thinking back to some of the press conferences with Mike Mayock. You heard him say many times, Mike or John and I are on the same page 100%. But looking back on their time together, I'm not sure if I fully believe that. I think there were slightly different philosophies maybe of what they looked for in certain players. And I think at times that clashed, and maybe we didn't hear about it as much. But when you look at, again, some of the picks, some of the signings that were made, like, for example, Antonio Brown, I don't think, that was obviously, to me, more of a Gruden guy. Mm-hmm. And I think that Mayock probably had a little bit more reservations about a move like that. And, of course, the head coach trumped him in that case. So I don't know if we'll see things like that occur with a combination of Ziegler and McDaniels.
Yeah, and the other thing is too. By the way, I am monitoring the chat over on Facebook on this new video platform that we're on. I'm not getting the Facebook comments, so it's our first show on this. So excuse me. We'll get better with it. We're going to be doing a lot more video, including of the Friday night show on the Mightier 10 By the way, if you don't listen, make sure you do. Silver and Black tonight, Mightier 1090 in Southern California. Every Friday night, 6 p.m. Pacific time, 9 p.m. on the East Coast for my East Coast friends. If you don't catch the show on Friday night live, which you can do on the TuneIn app or at the mightier1090.com, you can also catch it on our podcast feed, so subscribe to that as well. But lots of conversation over on YouTube that I can show you up as well, which is Raider Zach. We're going to see if we keep anyone on the staff. I would assume probably not. Yeah, Zach, that's what I was getting to with the point earlier, right, which is the fact that when you bring a new coaching staff in, especially like this, where you have the general manager and the coach having worked in tandem in the past, it's better to clear house. I mean, yeah, you might have every once in a while, I'm just going by previous experiences, you might have one guy, a linebackers coach or somebody like that, but offensive, defensive coordinator, special teams coordinator, those roles, Josh McDaniels has his guys, right? And he's going to go out and get them, and we'll see how that all works out. So I think that's going to do as we move along. Rossi Evans says that you guys are thinking the same. So you have the same brain.
I just saw that on my phone. I was checking the stream there on YouTube.
Raider 27, good to hear from you, man. And if I look at that, you are saying here, what are you saying? Oh, there you are. You are saying that GM head coach is a big job for one person. Yes, I agree. And for JFTV Network, McDaniels sold me when he said we're going to be explosive. Now, Evan, that, you hear in a press conference, these guys say something, right? And I got you on the wrong side there, but that's okay. You're on the left side now. But I'm learning. That's all well and good. And I heard somebody else in the comment, and I forgot to pop it up for you guys. You hear things in a press conference, and they sound great, but the task is at hand in the doing. Now, I thought Zeigler owned the room. I thought Josh McDaniels is not an orator. He's not a John Gruden. He's not going to get up there and ham it up. I think he'll be somewhere between a regular kind of coach that just talks and a Belichick, because he worked under Belichick. He was all nice yesterday getting the job, but I'm sure he's going to take some of that as well. But those impressions of how they were and what they say, we have to take all that with a grain of salt, don't we?
Yeah, I mean, especially with the general manager. I mean, I'll be honest, I didn't know much about any of these general manager candidates. You hear the fan base talking a lot about Ed Dodds and some of the other candidates. That was harder for me to kind of track and form an opinion on who I thought would be the best candidate. But as far as the head coaches go, we have more of a track record with some of these guys. And so, sometimes you get up there, listen to a general manager who you know nothing about, say all these great things, and you get, the fan base is fired up, and that's a great thing. But again, the proof is in the pudding. So, let's not get overly excited. I think it's an upgrade. I'm happy with the move. I do like the idea of kind of completely starting over with the front office and a brand new coaching staff, get some new eyes in there, new vision and some new philosophy. And I think that's a good thing for this team.
Speaking of newbies, Corey Flynn comment up on YouTube, first time watching this, passionate Raider. What's the plan for DC4? Oh boy, I've had a moratorium the last day talking about Derek Carr. No, but here's what I'll say because obviously the question was asked, right? Yeah. And the question, if you like Derek Carr, you heard exactly what you wanted to hear. If you don't like Derek Carr, you think you heard what you wanted to hear. So my point is I think Dave Ziegler said the right thing, which is, hey, listen, Derek Carr's a good quarterback. We feel good about it. We've talked to him briefly, but we got to sit down. We got to get to know each other. And that point of that isn't to say, oh, there's a chance they could get rid of him, or, oh, he's not going anywhere. I peg it at 80% that there's no question Derek Carr's back. I think he should be. I think he'll sign an extension. That's my prediction. But if they start to talk, and it's mutual, it's not the Raiders wanting to get rid of him. It's not Derek Carr wanting to get rid of the Raiders. But if they start to sit down and talk and they go down that journey and they discover that maybe the philosophy or their thinking about what they should be doing for both of them doesn't align, then you start to think, well, geez, hey, Derek, we're not clicking. So what do you want us to do? Or if it does, great. Then you move forward and Derek Carr is going to be your quarterback for quite a while. At least in my view, 3 years. I think a 3-year extension is going to happen, but I could be wrong. So Evan, that whole thing, like, I don't think it's controversy at all. I think that you go into every year thinking, okay, especially a player that's got only a year left on his contract, which really needs a rework, that you look at it and you say, okay, well, guess what? We're gonna do that. We're gonna talk about it, and we'll see where it goes.
Yeah, and you and I have had this conversation privately when we were discussing, the attractiveness of this job, and we both agreed that Derek Carr was a big part of that. Not only a brand new stadium and facilities, and you've mentioned the tax benefits of living in Las Vegas and whatnot, but Derek Carr is also a big part of that. The team was 10-7 last year, of course, as well, and in a playoff team. But most of the times when you have teams searching for a new head coach, that team has a pretty, ugly situation at quarterback. I mean, go across the league and look at all the head coach openings. You could make a couple exceptions here and there, with the Jaguars being one of them. They got a rookie quarterback there. But for the most part, a lot of these teams don't have great quarterbacks. The Raiders have a pretty good quarterback on their team. And so we thought that would be an attractive landing spot for some good coaches. And I think that was the case with Josh McDaniels. And I think that, he said it. This team can win with Derek Carr. We saw it happen this year. He came up clutch in a lot of big moments. When the team needed these must-win games, he played well in big moments. And so, I don't think there was any doubt. I still don't think there's any doubt that he'll be the quarterback next year. I just don't see any better options out there right now. Yeah. So, I mean, things could certainly change, but at the moment right now, it looks like Derek Carr will be the quarterback next year. And I think it's only a matter of what will that extension look like.
Yeah, I saw a comment we put up. Passionate Raider, let me put that back up here, says, I'm saying 3 years, $75 million, fully guaranteed. I don't think that's enough. I think if you're going to do 3 years, you're looking at $90 million at least, and that's on a friendly deal. And I think it's not fully guaranteed. I think you get I think if I'm the Raiders, knowing that Derek Carr, even though he's still playing really well, he is going into year 9. So I wouldn't give him any fully guaranteed on the back end. What I would do is give him 3 years, $90 million, pay a lot of it up front. Okay. That gives you flexibility on the backside, but then also I'd give him a no trade clause, right? Because he's going to want that. I think that's going to be, he wants to decide where he's going to go. So after a year, if it's not working out, or after 2 years, they can release him because they don't have guaranteed money. Or if they want to move him later on, which I'm not saying is the case or that they would do, then they can do that with his permission, and he gets to go where, I mean, you get to be a 9-10 year guy in the league. You get that, right, Evan?
Yeah. I think he's earned that right, and I have heard the no trade clause kind of kicked around a little bit, and I agree with you. I do think that was something he'll probably want in the contract, and I like the idea of kind of front loading the contract in case they do want to get out of it later on. I mean, let's be honest, he's only 30, and I don't want to make it sound like that's old or anything, but he is on the back 9 of his career. I mean, yes, and I know quarterbacks are playing later in their into the late 30s and even come into their 40s, but it still is the back 9 of his career. So you don't want to go out and give him this huge long-term deal, but I think 3 years would be fair. And as far as the terms and money, I think you're right in the ballpark. I mean, what is the going rate for a quarterback these days? You're looking at $30-35 million. That's what the market is set at right now. So I think you're right with about 3 years, $90 million.
Yeah, shout out to my man, Ariel. Good to see you, man. Hope you're doing well. I saw you fell on your motorcycle or something. I hope you're doing better. And send good food. There's no good Cuban food in Ohio. Rossi says, no trade clause, comes with a hometown discount. Yeah, 3 years, $85 million. Rossi, dude, I got it. They should just call us and let us negotiate it, right, man? We could do it. I want him to get a good bum. I'm looking at $25 million a year to get a big name receiver. Yeah, I don't think you're going to spend $25 million on a big name receiver. I think if you look, what I would invite you guys to do, and I'm starting to do this, and full disclosure, I'm not there yet, Evan, but now with this kind of New England influence in Las Vegas, is I'm going and looking, very deeply at how the Patriots operated from a player personnel standpoint, from a contract standpoint. And if you look at what they've done, you can kind of get a blueprint. I'm not saying it's all going to be exactly the same, but you can get a blueprint for how Josh McDaniels and Dave Ziegler will run the Raiders. And so if you look at that now, again, first pass going, about 5 inches deep versus a foot deep, which I need to do, Evan, you look at this and you say, okay, all the folks who want Devontae Adams, not going to I don't see Dave Ziegler spending $30 million on a wide receiver when he's got to pay his quarterback. He's got to go out and build a defense still. He's got to build an offensive line and get receivers. If you look what the Patriots did, Evan, they got guys that can fit the role, who can play in the system, but they're not necessarily household names.
Yeah, and I agree with you 100% there. And that's one of the things I wrote down a couple comments that I wanted to mention here from his press conference. He says it's not just about acquiring talent and putting talent in the right spots, but it's about building a roster top to bottom that has depth that can sustain, a long season. And I think that kind of gives you a little bit of insight onto what he, some of his core beliefs are. But also, you mentioned Devontae Adams, and I know, there's the connection there with Derek Carr and Devontae Adams going back to college. But, again, looking at the Patriots traditionally over the years, they have not invested a whole lot in the wide receiver position. I mean, look at that roster of wide receivers this year. They got it done with guys like Kendrick Bourne, Jacoby Myers, Nelson Aguilar, of course, former Raider, N'Keal Harry, who, didn't have a healthy season, but played, tight ends, Hunter Henry, Jonnu Smith. And so, just not a position they seem to invest a whole lot of money in over the years. And another position, running back. And that's another conversation we can get into.
You mentioned this on Twitter today.
Yes. I'm curious as to what this all means for Josh Jacobs and also Kenyon Drake.
Yeah. I mean, they're plug and play, man. I mean, it's pretty remarkable. Yeah. I know, listen, I'm not expecting these two guys to create the Patriots exactly. I'm not saying they're going to do everything the same way, but you will see patterns. I mean, you don't come out of a system and not adopt some of what you learn there. So I think if you look at that, that's where I think Raider Nation, you have to think about these guys that they're going to build it the right way, and that's not going to always be sexy. I mean, there's nobody less sexy, and I use the term from a football perspective, by the way, than Bill Belichick, right? So if that's the case, and look what Belichick, I mean, I love watching his press conferences because they're so damn boring, right? He does it on purpose, and his questioning and what he answers is very limited. But there's a purpose behind that, and who cares as long as your beloved Raiders win, right? Am I right? You want to win championships, and that's what it's all about. So you'll have to temper your expectations on big signings, but start to look at, and if you're not, hey, look, people are busy. I know everybody's got a really difficult life as far as time goes, right? Family, kids, job, whatever you may be doing. Start to look at the draft, start to look at the free agents, and start to look at guys that might have played on the Patriots or in a system run by a Patriot assistant, and you start to see some guys that might make sense that these are guys. And look at what Dave Ziegler's done. Read all you can about him. Read about the players that he signed, that he was successful in bringing in, and I think you'll start to get some hints for where this Raider organization will go. Evan, now if we switch to the Josh McDaniel conversation, and talk about coaching style. He's an offensive coach, and so was John Gruden, but these guys are much, much different. If you look at what Josh McDaniels did, as we know, Tom Brady announced his retirement today. If you look at that situation, Josh McDaniels was there for a long time with Tom Brady, and if you listen to Tom Brady, he credits Josh McDaniels with helping him reach the level of success with all those rings on his finger. So if you look at that, Evan, I would anticipate that once they get all the right people in place, I think you'll have growing pains next year, right? But once you have them in place, I think Raider fans are finally going to get a dynamic play caller who knows how to develop talent significantly, and that we'll see a lot of excitement come out of that.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that Raider Nation has to be patient with, is that yes, this roster, the cupboards are not bare with this roster. They were a 10-win playoff team this year, but these guys do have a vision. They're going to want to, rework this roster slightly and get some of the guys in that fit the things that they want to do. So I like that you mentioned, like, there could be some growing pains, and I do agree with you. But I think in 2 or 3 years, once they get that roster built the way they want, we might see this team, at full force. And talking about Josh McDaniels, a couple of the things that I really like about him is, you mentioned working with the best, Tom Brady. This guy has called plays in a lot of big games. He's battle tested. He's been on the game's biggest, brightest stages, and he's been successful at that. So to me, that's very, very attractive. And when you look at some of the areas where the Raiders offense struggled this year, the Patriots offense was very good in all those areas this year with a rookie quarterback. And I think that goes to show you how good McDaniels is. Patriots red zone offense was 7th in the NFL this year. They were 27.2 points per game. That was 6th in the NFL. Again, with a rookie quarterback, and I named you some of the wide receivers that he was throwing the ball to. Right, nobody. Third down percentage, they were 7th this year in the NFL. They had a very productive rushing offense, which was 8th in the NFL. And so those are things, when you look at where you hope to see growth next year, it's in those areas: red zone offense, points per game, and third down conversion rate. And those are all areas where that Patriots offense were very good this year.
Yeah, absolutely. Shout out to our man, Kelly Kreiner, who is watching. He's not trash. For those of you who've watched for a long time, you understand that. But thanks, Kelly. Hope you're doing well, my friend. Miss you out there. So here's Raider 27. They're having a conversation in the chat. Of course, our good friend Wendy's up there talking about it. The draft may look boring. Kelly's comment was the draft was boring. Yes, this is not a very good draft, but there's always gems, and hopefully they find some if you're a Raider fan. And if you think here, having Waller and Moreau will be huge for McDaniels' 2 tight end sets. That's a great point, Ariel. And I think that I'm a little skeptical, I think, on Foster Moreau. I think he needs to make a big step next year. I think he was inconsistent. I don't know why. Maybe it was all the stuff going on. But to me, he's got to be able to block better. I mean, Evan, you and I, how many times did we text during games? We're like, holy moly, Foster Moreau's not blocking.
Yeah. Oh, many, many times. I would record many of the clips on my computer and put them out there on Twitter, not to troll Moreau or anything, but yeah, I was expecting a much bigger season from Foster Moreau than what we saw, and struggled badly in blocking and just was not as involved in much with the offense as I thought we would see. So yeah, definitely needs to take a big step forward. But that's a good point, because when you look back at these Patriots offense, there's a couple of skills that you see every year. You see productive third down receiving back. Think about James White and Shane Vereen and Dion Lewis. You also see a very productive tight end. Obviously Gronkowski, future Hall of Famer, but always have tight ends involved in the offense. And then a running back by committee. That's just something that they do. We talked about that a little bit earlier. As a fantasy football player myself, I always try to stay away from Patriots running backs, because you just never know who's going to be out there leading the backfield. It's all game plan designed, and they just don't care. They do whatever it takes to win. You saw that this year against Buffalo when they played here in Orchard Park, and the winds were blowing and the weather was cold, throwing the ball 3 times. They don't care. They're going to do whatever it takes to win. So I kind of like that about McDaniels. He's game plan specific, and he's prepared for any situation.
Yeah, and but to Ariel's point, it's true. I think those sets are definitely good. We have Kelly saying hi to our good friend Wendy. Then we have Kelly saying thanks to Ariel for saying he's still cool, or Kelly saying he's still cool. We'll get reports on whether that's true or not. But here's our good friend Corey, Corey was one of the first people who I think ever watched me on video way back in the day, like 2017 or 18. So Corey, what do you got for us? DC would take a pay cut if it meant Devontae comes to Las Vegas, but I'm more interested in that kind of staff. What kind of staff? Yeah, I just don't think look, I could be wrong. I just don't think they're going to pay that kind of money, but a good point. What about the staff, Evan? When you start to think about possibilities, offensive coordinator, obviously Josh McDaniels is going to be very involved in the calling of the offense. So whoever he gets in might be a more junior level person that they're grooming, they're bringing along. Whereas on the defensive side, though, I expect him to go out and get somebody good. Any ideas or thoughts that you have based on that tree, the Belichick tree, and where McDaniels has been and who you might pick?
To be honest, I really haven't put a whole lot of thought in the offensive coordinator position just because I know that McDaniels is going to have such a strong influence on that. But now that you mention it, a name that just came to my mind would be Bill O'Brien, another Patriot, former Patriot offensive coordinator, has some head coaching experience. I know that he had some head coaching interviews. I'm not sure if he's moved on to round 2 in any of those, but that would be a name maybe on the offensive side of the ball. But I'm focusing more so on the defensive side of the ball. That's what I'm concerned most about. And, the names we keep hearing, Wink Martindale, who has a past with not only the Raiders, he was a position coach with the Raiders years ago, but he was also a coordinator in Denver with McDaniels. I put out there on Twitter, I think Vic Fangio would be another guy, obviously not only because he's a great defensive mind, but he's a guy who knows the division very well. He just spent a few years as a head coach in the AFC West. So I think that would be a benefit to McDaniels. Mike Zimmer, another head coach who is now unemployed. I don't know if Raider fans want to go back down that road with the Mike Zimmer, Paul Gunther style defense. But he is available and he is known as a pretty defensive minded guy. And then a guy who we're hearing a lot about in the news today, Brian Flores, another connection to the Patriots. Not sure if he's going to get another coaching job. Right. Maybe not a head coaching job, but why not a defensive coordinator job, right? So those are some of the names that I've kind of been, keeping an eye on. But I like a guy like Martindale. He's got an aggressive style of defense, and I think that's one of the things that was lacking a little bit with this Gus Bradley defense from last year.
No doubt about it. And I mean, and listen, as much as the defense improved, remember they were still in the lower third of the league. They were 26 or 27. I didn't look at the final rank. I think it was 27. So yeah, they weren't 32 or 31, and they played better at times. And there's no question that there were times when they played well. But I think part of that is you were plug and playing veterans who knew the Bradley system, and it worked out pretty good. I mean, obviously Perryman would be back. I saw a report on Bleacher Report today saying that arguing that his contract should be one you get rid of to save money. I think that's a mistake. I think you bring him back. But if you look at all of those other situations on defense, there's a lot of work to do there. The linebacking position has got to be addressed for the future. And so I know they'll address some offense and defense in draft. This is where Dave Ziegler's got to earn his money immediately, Evan, because there's so many points of need. I know this was a playoff team. Like they said yesterday, not a full rebuild. I might disagree with them that it's not as far along as many people say it is, because I don't think it is. They won 10 games. I expect them to go backward next year, not because I don't think it's a good team. I just think that they're going to have to learn new systems, which they can do pretty quickly, but also they're going to have to find the right players to play in those systems on offense and defense. One thing I thought was really interesting too yesterday was when they asked him about the whole 3-4 versus 4-3. And he said, listen, man, in the NFL today, it's mostly nickel anyway because of the way the game is played. And Evan, that was significant to me because it's true, number one. And number two, so many people are focused on 4-3 versus 3-4. We have Max Crosby and Yannick Ngakoue. It's like, no, in the NFL, it's mostly nickel and 4 guys up front anyway.
Yeah, he said you have to have 5, good starting defensive backs, which is true. And I'm not sure if the Raiders, have that right now. That would be one area where they need to look to address, I think. But yeah, he didn't lock himself in there with that response. I think that was a pretty wise way to go about it. But he did kind of expand a little bit on that and talked about how this team was built, in the mold of a 4-3 team. So, it'll be interesting to see, where he decides to go, him and Ziegler with that defensive coach. And, it's got to be a good hire because you mentioned it. The defense showed some improvements, but still lacked in a lot of areas. They did not turn the ball over as much as I would have liked to seen this year. They generated some pressure, but they didn't get home enough. We didn't see enough game-changing plays. I think that'll be something that they need to improve on next year, because you talk about taking a step back. And I agree. I think that will be the case, because when you look at how the Raiders won this year, okay, and I know, it's important to win close games, but they won 7 games this year when you average out the score of those 7 wins, 3.42 points per game. So, I mean, they won these really, really close games. That is not like a recipe is it sustainable? I guess that's the question I'm asking. I don't know if it is. It's NFL, things change on a year basis, but man, when you're winning games or you're relying on fourth quarter drives with 2 minutes to go, you're playing with fire. So they're going to have to figure out another way to win and not rely on things to come together in the final 2 minutes of the game.
No, and I think that's what's going to happen. Obviously, player moves are going to take a while, right? You have the Super Bowl, and you have some dead period, and you have some other contract thing going on, and you got to take care of some of those guys in the building once McDaniels and Ziegler have a chance to kind of address what they believe to be their biggest roster needs. But at the same time, it's that coaching staff, and I'm really interested to see how they build it out. And to me, that'll be really important. But I think it's an exciting time. Listen, Raider Nation has waited too long. This fan base was so excited, Evan, when John Gruden came back, and of course that basically imploded after a while. Luckily, he did more good than damage, and when it came to building the team, despite the missed draft picks, despite all of that, and I think that you're going to have to see it now, an organization that's going to have to work a lot harder and turn it around quickly. And I say turn it around, I mean get from being competitive to being a championship caliber team. That's going to be hard because you look at the landscape of the rest of the AFC, Evan. Look at the playoffs we just went through, right? I mean, look at the Bengals. Look at the Chiefs, even though I think the Chiefs are actually going to descend a little bit. And I'm not just saying that as red meat to the Raider crowd. But then you have Baltimore. You have Buffalo, where you're at with Josh Allen. You have all these young quarterbacks that are coming into their own. And even up in New England with Mac Jones and what they're doing there. There's a lot of good things happening. The AFC continues to get really competitive. This team has got to get better quickly. You might have a little bit of a slower step in year one under these guys, but you can't get that far behind or you might never catch up.
Yeah, absolutely. The AFC is going to be in good hands with a lot of these young quarterbacks here in the next 5 to 10 years. And, the Raider fan base, they got a taste. They got a taste of some success this year. They got a taste of the playoffs. It had been a few years. So, I don't envy Ziegler and McDaniels, because if they don't get things going and consistently, building a winner here and keeping things on track, this fan base, they can be impatient. So, but I think they did make a good hire. I think Mark Davis did a nice job. It was thorough. And, I think he got a really good head coach in Josh McDaniels.
No, I agree. And it was unexpected to me. I mean, I really felt that Harbaugh was the best choice. But I saw some comments from somebody early over on Facebook and on YouTube saying, hey, that they were kind of relieved that it wasn't Harbaugh because Harbaugh is a much bigger name. And I don't know if it's a bigger name, but definitely a lot more personality, more difficult personality with a lot more, if you want to consider it either baggage or history. And so Josh McDaniels, even though he had that failure the first time in Denver, I thought that was really important. And part of the conversation that our good friend Mo Moten, who co-hosts the Mightier 1090 show with me on Friday nights and writes for Sportsnaut and for Bleacher Report, talked about, what kind of life are you living that if you think after 12 years someone hasn't changed, right? So the people who were not in favor of even Josh McDaniels being considered for the Raiders job kept going back to 12 years ago. Well, he was a really young guy, and he admitted it yesterday. I thought that was a key point in the press conference, Evan, is when he said, look, I didn't know people then. Like, I didn't know people. I didn't know, I thought I knew football. I thought I knew people, but I didn't know how to do it. He basically was a mea culpa that he wasn't ready, right?
Oh, yeah.
But that's changed.
Yeah, and I thought that was a huge part, because that was like the big elephant in the room. That was the question that that was the biggest concern that Raider Nation had when they heard Josh McDaniels' name come up, was, wow, this guy failed miserably in Denver. And he came right out. He took it head on. He addressed it. He said, I failed. And I thought that showed a lot of growth on his part. And he talked about that, how he knew very little, he knew a little bit about football, but he knew very little about relationships and, working together with people. And so, he obviously has shown that in the past 10 years, he's grown. He had a quote in there, and I can't recall exactly what the quote was, but he said a wise man once told him that, as a younger person, you're thinking a little bit more about yourself and trying to work your way up the ladder, and you're not thinking about all the people that are involved and that you're working with. And as you get older, that mindset kind of changes a little bit. So, I mean, listen, he was 33 years old when he was coaching that team. That is extremely young, and so he's matured a lot. I expect him to do things a lot different this time around, and I expect him to have some success.
Yeah, I do too, and I think that I think we'll see that, and it'll just be it's going to be tough to see how quickly it comes together, and I think that a lot of it'll be. I think a lot of people will be excited to see what kind of staff he puts together, right? Because to me, that's one of those keys, which is, hey, if you can put a staff together and bring in that coaching that they're going to need. And then you got to get to the roster, right? You got to be able to address the roster situation, and that's going to take a little bit of time. And see that Rossi. Here's another comment before we get ready to get going here. The Broncos, they weren't bothered. He wasn't mad about it. It's how he treated the Colts. That's the character issue I have. Rossi, it's a good point. Although I will tell you that, and I'm sure you've been in the situation where you go interview for a job. And everything looks right, and you feel good about it, but then you leave there. And this has happened to Evan. I don't know if it's happened to you, but I've left and gone back, and it's like, okay, we want you. And you're like, okay, cool. And then you're like, man, something, I just don't feel right about it, right? And so you might say, initially you say, yeah, I'm excited about it, and then you have second thoughts. And I think that Josh McDaniels did that with the Colts. Not saying it was a good look. Even for me, the company I did an interview with a big hotel company. This is back when I got out of boxing and I was looking for my next role. And it was a big hotel company. I was going to go run digital content for them. And they flew me out to the East Coast to meet with them, wined and dined me. I got back and they said, hey, you want to come work here? I said, yeah, I do. It would be a great opportunity. Send me the offer. So then they put together the offer, and I took a couple days to think on it, and then they pressed me for an answer, and I basically pulled out of it. And they were not happy, right? Because you just don't know what's going on the other side. So I understand it from a human perspective that happens. I don't necessarily think that it was a character issue, Rossi, but I can see from the outside perspective why you might think so and why there might be a question. And I think with McDaniels, a lot of it is personality based. And I think, Evan, that we're going to have to see him win over the fans, number one. You got to win over the players first, but then he's going to have to win over the fans to show that he's a guy who really believes that it was a fumble, but also believes that he's there to make the Raiders a winning organization.
Yeah, I tell you, and from what I was reading out there on Twitter, it seems like he's already won the fans over. I mean, how quickly the minds have changed. And you're reading, some negative stuff's out there about McDaniels when his name was being tossed around, but the fan base seems to be buying in already. They like what they saw from him. And one thing I will say about what happened with the whole Colts deal there. It's hard to defend that, right? I mean, he accepted the job and then he backed out of it. But we don't really know what the circumstances were. I mean, from the outside, we just don't know the details. Was there more information that he later found out, or I mean, there's a lot of things that we aren't privy to. So to sit here, as an outsider and pass judgment, we just don't know. But I understand why the fan base felt the way they did. It's not a good look. As I said, it's hard to defend, but I'm sure if you were able to sit down and talk to him and get the full story, then maybe you would understand the decision that he had to make, what he thought was best for him.
That's the thing, is it's always a little bit of what we don't know. You have certain facts that are out there. And remember, as Evan, we talk about on our group chats all the time, that there are sometimes agendas by other people, and they try to filter into the media and do things like that, that to push a narrative, right? So we don't know what happened with Josh McDaniels. Maybe he'll explain it sometime in the future now that he's the Raiders coach. But I also do know that, I mean, you look at what's happening in the landscape of the NFL. Of course, the big Brian Flores racial lawsuit. Excuse me, I had to spit it out. Lawsuit today. They're alleging that the NFL is systematically racist when it comes to hiring coaches. I've seen a lot of comments saying that the Raiders should go hire him for the DC. We'll see if he wants a head coaching job. I know he was going to interview in New Orleans. I don't know how it changes the landscape, but it goes back to the whole Rooney Rule and all that stuff. But the reason I say this is because for the last 3 years, all I've heard about was how Eric Bieniemy was not getting a job because of a certain reason, when now we're learning a lot more about Eric Bieniemy and the interviews and stuff like that, and that maybe they don't go so well, and that maybe he's just not impressive when you get him in a room to talk about it. Now, I don't know that that's true. I don't know the full truth, and that's my only point, is we can only make assumptions based on the outside, and I think that's the same with Josh McDaniels, and we'll have to see what's going on there too. But I do know that the nation is excited, and I think overall they're really, I think at worst some people are cautiously optimistic, meaning that I've been burned before. I just want to make sure this goes well. So I think this offseason building up to the draft, which is of course going to be in Las Vegas in April, there'll be a lot of things. Raider 27, thank you, man, for being back. We're going to be doing a lot more video. We're trying to do it more when we can and during the offseason to connect with you. Make sure you listen to the radio show as well, and listen to Just Pod Baby. Make sure you subscribe to Evan's podcast as well. But Evan, it was fun jumping on with you, man. It's going to be an exciting few months. Of course, we rather have the Raiders in the Super Bowl, but at the very least, we're going to have a lot of news to talk about here. But I appreciate you joining me today, man.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me on. It's going to be a busy next couple of months here as we gear up for free agency and the draft. Now that we know who the head coach and the general manager are going to be, we can start to focus on some other things.
No doubt about it. All right. Want to thank all of you guys for being with us too, and for putting up with the new video system here that I'm getting used to, but thanks for doing that. And a reminder, please go check out and subscribe to Evan Groat's podcast, which is Just Pod Baby. Great podcast. Evan is a fan, but he does it so well. He tells it like it is. It's not just rose-colored glasses. He's not going to tell you Derek Carr's the number 5 quarterback in the league. I'm just kidding. He is yards-wise. But he's at least top 12. So you can go get that. Make sure you can subscribe to it anywhere that you get podcast. It's brought to you by Sportsnaut, our new home. If you haven't gone to sportsnaut.com to read Mo Moton, to read my stuff, to listen to Evan's podcast, be sure to do that. Also, check out our radio show. We have our Silver and Black tonight on the Mightier 1090 down in Southern California. Southern California's only all-Raider radio show, Friday night, 6 p.m. on the Boomer, 50,000 watts from Baja to the Canadian Rockies. You can hear it all over California. If you can't get it, make sure you listen online, the TuneIn app or the mightier1090.com. You can also subscribe to our podcast feed where you can do that. Make sure you follow Evan on Twitter. That's eGroat, GROAT5. You can follow me at LV Gully. So I appreciate you guys all being here. And thanks for all the great chat. Just phenomenal throughout the entire show. And I wish all of you a great rest of your week. And we'll talk to you Friday night on the Mightier 1090. Thanks, everybody. And we'll talk to you next time.